It's Monday. That means we haven't been on the air for 2 days, which means there's a huge pile of stuff that has happened. Rolling down the road to fascism here in Trumpland. It is amazing what is going on. There are so many things to go through. Actually, we'll start with probably the big national story here. There's two of them, actually. In fact, I'm going to start with a different one. I just watched Kris Kobach on CNN say that they think that they've got 6,000 people in New Hampshire who are voting in 2 states. Now, as Greg Palast has talked about on this program multiple times, and you can watch his documentary on this, in which he confronted Kris Kobach, who ran away from him. The documentary is called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. You can watch it for $3 over at Amazon.com. Or you can buy the DVD for a little more than that. Or you can read his op-ed, his piece about it, his summary of it. It was published back in August, I think, or October of last year in Rolling Stone. Just, plug into a search engine, Greg Palast and Rolling Stone, and it'll pop right up. That what Kris Kobach has done is he's put together this giant database, giant nationwide voter database. All, voter records are all public records. So you can pull the voter records of any particular state if you just want to, cover the expenses of it. Any, the kind of right-wing money this guy gets, he can cover any expenses. And as Greg Palast points out, he says, Christine Hernandez in New Jersey must be the same as Christine Hernandez in Miami, even though the one in New Jersey has a different middle name than the one in Miami. And he's asserting, they're voting in 2 states. To the best of my knowledge, and I might be wrong on this, but I don't think so. I've seen, every year, Drudge breathlessly tells us about the 4, 5, 6, 8 cases every year of, quote, voter fraud that get caught and prosecuted in the United States. And typically, actually, the last couple ones that were, breathlessly reported by the right-wing media were people voting Republican, ironically enough, which Kobach pointed out today to give him, give the devil his due. But typically, it's either felons who didn't realize that they can't vote in the state. There's a half a dozen states where felons can't vote for the rest of their lives. Or people voting for their spouse. And there have been 1 or 2 cases of people who weren't citizens, who thought they could vote or just wanted to vote, whatever. But, I mean, we're talking more people die of lightning than, quote, vote illegally. This is a non-problem. And so what Kobach has done, he's put together this giant, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody has ever been prosecuted for voting in 2 different states. But this is what Kobach is doing. And why, you ask? Well, because if you build a giant database, the most common names are going to pop up as the most potential violators. Anybody whose last name is Hernandez or Garcia, anybody whose last name is Kim there's basically, or Washington or Jackson or Jefferson. There are names that are highly, very common, that tend to appear way out of proportion in minority communities. There's a lot more diversity of names among Caucasians, basically, because of, immigration from all kinds of different European countries that have different languages and different cultures and different names. And so the vast majority of the people who get caught up in Kobach's database are either Hispanic or Black or Asian. And he claims that they're voting in 2 states, so purge them off the voting rolls. So you get thousands, tens of thousands of people in these states where he does this who show up to vote, stand in line for hours, and when they get to the front of the line, they're told, you're not on the voting roll, but here's a provisional ballot, because the Help America Vote Act back in 2002 said everybody's entitled to a ballot, even if they're not on the list. They're not entitled, however, for that ballot to be counted. Provisional ballots are not counted, and 99% of Americans don't know that. I would venture to bet. And so they vote on a provisional ballot, and they think they voted. even after Kobach has purged them off the rolls. And so when they walk out and they talk to the exit pollster, they say, oh, yeah, I voted for Hillary Clinton, which is why the polls, the exit polls, showed Hillary winning, and not just Hillary, I mean, Democrats in general, showed, because it's Democrats that get purged. This is all about politics. Showed Democrats winning in, a half a dozen at least states in the last election where the voting count showed them losing. Why? Because the provisional ballots weren't counted. Well, why did those people go all through all that trouble of voting? Well, because they registered to vote. They just didn't realize Kris Kobach had bumped their name off the list. And what the Republicans are fixing to do, they're looking at this, they're looking at the Women's March here in Washington, D.C., they're looking at these town halls, Jason Chaffetz and all these others, and they're going, holy cow, 2018 is going to be a bloodbath. Midterms are always a bloodbath for the party in power. And so the Republicans are saying, how can we keep power in 2018? Well, what we've got to do is throw a bunch of Democratic voters off the voting rolls. Give them provisional ballots. Let them think they voted. That way you won't have protests, but don't count their votes. I mean, this is like so sophisticated, so beyond Jim Crow, and it relies on the President of the United States telling a big lie. 3 to 5 million people voted illegally, that's right, and they were busing people into New Hampshire. No, none of that happened. But the big lie promoted relentlessly to now where you've got this belief. A majority of Republican voters now believe that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally in the last election. You might have had 3 to 5 people who voted illegally in the last election, but not 3 to 5 million. Might have even been 3 to 5 dozen, but they didn't swing any elections anywhere. I mean, they arrested a woman in Texas for voting illegally and sent her to 8 years in prison just a couple of weeks ago, just in time to hit the news cycle. This is all organized. And this is just absolutely outrageous. Let me tell you how the big lie works as with regard to the media. And this is, I mean, Goebbels wrote about this, right? You tell a lie that is so big, so outrageous, and repeat it enough times, and people will say, well, that's so big and so outrageous, it's got to be true, or he wouldn't say it. I mean, if it wasn't true, the sky would fall, right? So Kris Kobach goes on CNN about a half hour ago, maybe an hour ago, 30, 40 minutes ago. I tweeted about this, in fact. And he says, oh, we got 8,000 people in New Hampshire we think voted, or 6,000 people in New Hampshire we think might have voted illegally, might have voted in 2 states. It's a complete scam. And he's literally debating the reporter. She's saying, you know, the Republican secretary or attorney general, former attorney general of New Hampshire is saying, there ain't no such thing. And Kobach's like, well, we got to investigate this. I mean, he may just not know. I'm doing this from memory and I'm paraphrasing, of course. But here's how this works. You and I watch that on CNN and we go, there's Kris Kobach being a fool, lying through his teeth. And boy, that woman, I don't know the name of the reporter who was arguing with him. She's must be relatively new there. I don't watch CNN frequently enough to know everybody's name. And I'm watching that, I'd say, boy, she really kicked his butt. But here's the thing. Let's say that there's 1 million people watching CNN at that particular moment. And 900,000 of them watch CNN regularly, share the opinion of the host, and are sitting around like you and me going, well, she really kicked Kris Kobach's butt. But there's 100,000 of them who are going, who are Trump supporters, and Trump started this lie. And they're going, well, the president said it. And now this guy, the Secretary of State from Kansas, he's saying it. It must be true. Even if the reporter doesn't want to hear it, it must be true. And so at the end of that little 5-6 minute debate that happened on CNN, it doesn't matter. They don't care about the 900,000 who thought that she kicked his butt. They really don't care, because they know that they don't have those people anyway. All they need is a small enough number to enact legislation to push people off the voting rolls. So Kobach is thinking, hey, I just picked up another 100,000 people who believe my lie. And he did. And the more frequently they can get that out there, the more Stephen Miller, over the weekend, oh yeah, there's voter fraud, yep, it's going on. Every single time they do this, they pick up another 10,000, another 50,000, another 500,000, another million, and pretty soon they've got their critical mass.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And when they have their critical mass, they turn around and they pass these voter suppression laws, and you lose your right to vote, particularly if your skin is darker than mine. The big lie, and just to give it a little reality, the big lie that Hitler told was after World War I, Germany was in ruins. And after the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was in debt multiples of their GDP. It impoverished every German and would for at least a generation. And so what they had to do in order to deal with this in their minds, the right-wingers, this was Hitler's path to power. What Hitler had to do was convince the average German that they hadn't lost the war because their cause was wrong. They hadn't lost the war because their army was incompetent. They had lost the war because of an enemy within. Whether that enemy within was somebody who is voting when they're not authorized to vote, or in the case after World War I, the enemy within was the Jews. It was the Jews who caused Germany to lose World War I in the Hitler narrative. And at first, when he started saying this, and I commend to you the rise and fall of the Third Reich, when Hitler first started talking about this, the press actually was doing the same thing that CNN was doing with Kobach, saying, no, that's not true. There's no evidence of that. Prove it. And the Nazis would say, well, we don't have to prove it. We just know it. And the press would laugh at them, and they write op-eds and say, oh, look at these idiots from Bavaria. They think they've got this thing figured out. Oh, the Jews are responsible for World War I being lost by Germany? Really? Come on, that's crazy. But once again, you say the big lie, and yeah, 90% of the people listen to it and go, that's a friggin' lie. But they pick up another 10%. They pick up another million people here. They pick up another million people there. They pick up 20,000 people here. They pick up 50,000 people there. And pretty soon that big lie has so much momentum that good Germans all over the country are saluting as the trains are going to Auschwitz. Because after all, those people caused us to lose World War I. And today, the big lie, I mean, there's a number of them that are being promoted by the Trump administration. The biggest one right now, and my guess is they're taking them one at a time, right? I mean, the big lie a couple of weeks ago was that, people from these 7 Muslim majority countries are coming here to kill us. In the last 30 years, there hasn't been a single terrorist act committed on U.S. soil by anybody from any of those 7 countries. Now, there were people from Saudi Arabia who committed a terrorist act in this country, but Donald Trump has business interests in Saudi Arabia. We're not going to put them on the list. And so let's just tell the big lie. And well, here's what Franklin Roosevelt had to say about this. Listen to this.
The opposition in this year has already imported into this campaign a very interesting thing because it's foreign. They have imported the propaganda technique invented by the dictators abroad. Remember, a number of years ago, there was a book, Mein Kampf, written by Hitler himself. The technique was all set out in Hitler's book, and it was copied by the aggressors of Italy and Japan. According to that technique, you should never use a small falsehood. Always a big one. for its very fantastic nature, would make it more credible. If only you keep repeating it over and over and over again.
Okay, there you go. And eventually you get people who actually believe it, and they really and truly believe it. And there, you know, and there will always be a little bit of anecdotal evidence for these lies. I mean, Hitler was able to find Jews who actually argued that Germany was wrong with regard to World War I and pointed to them and said, well, there's my proof. Eventually, you know, those people pop up. For example, Robert in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Hey, Robert, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
I just wanted to address Rosa Maria Ortega,
I'm listening.
the illegal alien in Texas that was arrested for voting illegally 5 times. I understand it's an individual case.
Yes, it is. Robert, thank you for making my point.
It does happen.
Yes, it happened
Illegal
once
voting
in Texas.
happens, but you continually make it sound like it never happens anywhere.
No, I say, you know, I have said, you know, 10, 20, 30, 50 times in the entire country every year. Yeah. But it's not changing an election. And is it worth throwing millions of people off the voting rolls and blocking millions of other people from voting in order to stop that one woman who just got an 8-year sentence for voting when not being a U.S. citizen in Texas? Is it worth it, Robert, in your mind?
No, it's not worth it, but I'm not saying it doesn't cause an investigation, or the perception is, where are the other?
Yeah, okay. So, Robert, you're absolutely making my point. You're one of those people. If you were in Germany right after World War I, you would have been one of the people going, yeah, I guess Hitler's right. The Jews did cause us to lose World War I. Robert, thanks a lot for the call and for making my point for me.